Hey friends, welcome back to my sewing room. My name is Becca, and in today's video, we're going to put together block number 9 for the Bright Side Quilt Along. I'm super excited to do this. For those of you that don't know what this is, in the description box below this video, you'll find a link to each and every one of the 13 patterns. There are 12 blocks plus a finishing setting, and each one can be purchased from Fat Quarter Shop for $4.98. If you receive the Sew Sampler box from Fat Quarter Shop starting in April 2021 and ending in March 22, you actually already have all of these cards. I started this sew along back in 2021 in April, and then I moved and I had to put a pause on this, but I am back and I am trying to get this caught up so that I can do the new Block of the Month series that started coming in the April 2022 box. As a reminder, these are not my patterns, so I can't give you any of the cutting instructions. I have sized, cut, and labeled all of my fabric according to the pattern instructions, and that's where we're going to pick up. So if you are sewing with me, now would be a great time to pause the video, go cut your fabric, and I'll meet you right back here. This is the block we're going to make, so let's grab our pattern and get started. In step 1, we're going to grab all 6 of our fabric A squares, and we're going to draw a diagonal line on the back side of each one of these lovely pieces of fabric. And as you guessed it, we're going to be making some half square triangle units with this. So instead of stitching on or right next to the line, we're going to pair this up with another square that is the same size, and we're going to stitch just under a 1/4 inch away from the line on both sides of that line. And then we'll cut it apart on this line that we drew, and that's going to produce 2 half square triangle units per pair of fabric. So when I'm all done, I believe I should have 12 half square triangle units, but we'll see how that actually works out. Okay, that's all marked. We're going to pair these fabric A squares with our fabric C square, and I'm just going to pick a fabric C and a fabric A square, put them right sides together, and stitch a 1/4 inch away on either side of that line that I just drew. I am going to chain piece down one side of each of these lines on all 6 pairs. And then I'll flip it around and come back down the other side. I'm going to grab my blade saver tool to snip the threads in between each of these pieces. Then I'm going to grab my rotary cutter and a ruler, and I'm going to cut on the line for each one of these 6 pairs that I have. Now that all of these are sewn, it's time to press them, and the instructions say that we need to press the seams for these open. So the way I do that is I grab a half square triangle unit and I lay it so that the seam is face up, and then I just use my 2 pointer fingers to kind of work my way into this seam while I'm holding down the fabric with my middle finger, and then I just run my fingernail along that seam. But I do want to show you there are some tools that you can use out there, like this magic seam wand, that allow you to do that same activity without putting some wear and tear on your nails. So it's a little finicky to get your finger in there, but once you do, you're pretty good to go. You just run it along just like you would with everything else. I'm going to go ahead and keep pressing all of these with my finger. This is just going to make it a little bit easier for me when I get to the point where I want to iron. If you wanted to combine both steps at once, you are definitely welcome to do that. All those units are finger pressed now, and this is the part that becomes a little bit easier because I've prepped the fabric to be ironed. I'm just going to grab each half square triangle unit, lay it on my mat, and run my hot iron over it from the back, and that's going to really convince that seam to stay laying in a position where the seam is open. And now we've got to square all these up so that they're the right size square to fit in this block. When I square up a half square triangle unit, the first thing that I'm looking for is this 45-degree line to go right on top of the seam where those two fabrics are being connected. And then secondly, I want to make sure that I have fabric extending to the left of the measurement that I need to square up to. And underneath, along the bottom, it needs to go past it, the measurement that I want to square up to. Then I'm going to clean up the right and the top. I'll push that away, flip this around 180 degrees, and I'm going to repeat what I just did. I'm going to put my 45-degree line right on top of that seam, but this time the cut edge, the raw edge, is going to go right at the line that I want to square up to. When you use that 45-degree line on your ruler to square up a half square triangle unit, that's going to help make sure that both of the fabrics in your half square triangle unit come to a point in each of the corners, which is going to help you when you put your block together. We're going to repeat that step to square this up for all 12 of these. So, heads up, this is going to take a minute. In step number 2, we're going to take 8 of our half square triangle units, and we're going to make 4 units that look like flying geese. So what we're going to do is position our background fabric out to the outer edges. They should be pointing up and out away from the print. And then the other 2 pieces of fabric, the prints, will be joined together so that it looks just like a flying geese unit. We're going to do this 4 times. When you're doing this, you want to make absolutely careful, absolutely sure that you've got the fabric oriented the right way before you take that seam. It can be really easy to get things turned around, so I like to lay them out on my sewing table in front of me and then make sure it's positioned the right way, and then I lay them right sides together and put them under the needle. You want to make sure that you only made 4 of those units because the other 4 pieces that you have, you're going to use these to make a flying geese in a different orientation, which we'll get to in step 3. Since I chain stitched that, we're going to use my blade saver to slice these apart. And then the instructions want us to press these seams open as well. So I'm going to grab my little blocks, I'm going to open them up, put my fingers in the seam, and just run my fingernail right along that piece of fabric. Now that everything's finger pressed, I'm going to spread it out. I'm going to grab my iron and come in and really just convince those seams to lay nice and flat. The last part of step 2 is to take 2 of each of these little flying geese units that we've made and join them together along this white seam right here. If you do this right, then your background fabric is in the outer corners and pointing down towards you, and your print fabric is pointing up. You're going to take a seam right here and press that open. You're going to make 2 of these units. And again, I want to make sure my fabric's going in the right direction. So I'm going to lay it out on the table in front of me to make sure it's oriented the right way. Then I will put them right sides together and put it under my needle and take my seam. Just like that, we're going to press this seam open. First with our finger, then with the iron. Pressing these seams open really is helping our pieces to lay much flatter than they would have if we would have just pressed to one side. everything, it looks like this block's probably going to be pressed open. This is the top and bottom row of our block, and now we're going to build out that middle row. And to do that, we're going to grab our remaining 4 half square triangle units, and we're going to put together some flying geese units that are reverse image of what we made before. This time, we're going to have the background fabric in the center pointing up, and then the wings are going to be the print. Just like we did with the other flying geese units, we're going to press these seams open too. These are going to be positioned on the sides of our block just like this. So all we have to do is build out that center square. And this is going to be another square in a square or economy block. We've done these before. It's the same principle here. We're going to grab our fabric D and our fabric B. And the first thing we're going to do is draw a line on the wrong side of all 4 of our fabric B squares. Just like I've done every other time I've made this block, I'm going to position 2 of these squares in opposite corners, making sure that that diagonal line runs from the middle of the raw edge to the middle of the other raw edge. We don't want it coming in from the corner. We want it running parallel to the corner, and the lines are running parallel to themselves. In this case, we are just going to stitch 1 thread to the right of that line. And if you want to, then you can stitch another line about a ½ inch away from it so that you can use the leftover cutoff as a half square triangle unit in another project. Just going to grab my ruler, cut off those little extra pieces. I stitched an extra seam on here, so now I have some bonus half square triangle units that I can use later. Now we're going to grab our other 2 squares, put them in the opposite corners, making sure that the lines are parallel to each other, and take a seam 1 thread to the right of that drawn line as well. Just like we did before, we're going to cut those pieces off. And the directions actually say we're going to press these seams all out. They don't need to be pressed open, so I'm just going to press them with my hand, and then I'm going to come in with a hot iron and press this from the top of my block. This is the center block that's going to go right here in the middle. Did I do this wrong? I did this wrong. This is the moment in the video where I realize that my sides were put on incorrectly, because these should be pointed towards the middle. So we're going to get my seam ripper out and we're going to fix that. Oh boy. Now is a great time to show you how I use my seam ripper. So I put the ball end of my seam ripper in to the seam. I fold or roll the seam up towards the top so I have better control over it. Then I put the ball down in there. And I just kind of glide along that seam. If I get to a spot where the seam ripper doesn't really want to move, I stop, shake things out, and I go back in for another attempt. Kudos to Teresa from Teresa Louise I Quilt 2 for teaching me how to do this, because I totally was doing that thing where you took the sharp end and you were just like plucking every single stitch. And that made my time with Jack not pleasant. But ever since she taught me how to use a seam ripper like this, I don't mind having to rip a seam if I need to. Plus, that sound that it makes is just amazing. Before I put everything back together, I've got all these seams folded, so I'm going to take a minute to press them out so that everything kind of lays open and isn't fighting against me when I put it through the machine. I'm not going to worry about getting it to be super flat. I just want it to be flat enough that I can manipulate the fabric. Okay. Let's lay this back out and make sure that all of our pieces are oriented the right way. We're going to put our middle piece in the middle, and this is what we should be looking for. Now with these, we're going to press them open again. Now that the center row is built the right way, we're going to put our top and bottom rows back on. And for these rows, we're going to press them open, just like we did before. Should be a little bit easier this time because that crease is still there somewhat. Now I'm going to flip it over from the top, give it some nice heat, and I am going to best press it one more time. It's going to look like there was nothing ever wrong. But you and I will know the difference. Ah, yes, that is a much prettier block. I definitely like what it was supposed to be, not what I did. All right, just because there's so much bulk in there, I'm going to grab my clapper and let that sit on there while the block cools. So that is block number 9 for the Bright Side Quilt Along. I love how it turned out now that it's built the correct way. I can't believe we only have 3 more blocks to do before we put this quilt top together. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous, and I can't wait to get it on my long arm. If you liked what you saw here, including the mistake, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you guys all real soon in block number 10. Bye-bye!